Tonight, Rossi's man tells us about Ducati's MotoGP program. Are they making progress? He's won a swag of world titles with Gardner, Doohan and Valentino Rossi. But what's life like these days at Ducati? Daz chats with JB, Jeremy Burgess. From a bike enthusiast to a man who's engineered more world titles than most trophy cabinets have room for. Jeremy Burgess putting some Aussie nous in Ducati's MotoGP bike. Back everybody, nice to have you with us. MotoGP heads to Le Mans in France this weekend, round 4 of the 2011 World Championship. So let's talk about the premier two-wheel series now, thanks to Crown Forklifts. If I got it right, it would be Crown Lift Trucks. Let me get that correct. Jorge Lorenzo leads the title race, but the Yamaha riders feel like they haven't had the bike to match Honda so far this year. They've made some improvements, though, in that Portugal test. Yeah, I think the championship took a bit of a turn when, obviously, Valentino Rossi and Casey Stoner came together. But Jorge, last year's champions, just plugging away at it. The test, as you said, was very, very impressive for him. And Jorge came out and said, you know, I feel like we've now made a massive direction change. I'm a lot more confident in the bike. We won't have a new engine, and all things are positive. And it seems that Yamaha may not be missing Valentino Rossi and Jeremy Burgess. They're busy re-engineering the Ducati. I sat down with JB before he jetted off to France. JB, I guess this gives you a damn good reason to come home to Adelaide, bugger Europe.
Yeah, it was better in the summer, but it's good to get home, see the kids and wife, of course. She's always happy to see me.
That's not always the case.
No, always, Darryl. Yes.
Ducati.
Yep.
We're 3 months into the first of the season. Looking at it now, 3 races in, a long way to go, but what's your feeling so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a hard start. I mean, clearly with Valentino's injury, the bike's being built at the end of last year and not sort of leading into the first race. I think ideally, having a fit rider, we could have perhaps had a bit of a stronger bike in Qatar. But it is what it is. We're now starting to make progress. The break that we had prior to the race in Portugal, Valentino's fitness improved a lot. And we had a very, very good test on the Monday after the race.
The test after the race seems like, from outside information, that it's the first decent batch of parts you've had to make the bike better. Is that true? Yeah,
we got what we wanted. And both parts, the chassis and the engine, were improvements. We need more in both directions, but if this was the second test in Sepang, I'd be very, very happy. Unfortunately, it's the first test during the Grand Prix season, and we're a little bit behind.
It seems like everyone's making advancements, not round by round, but we've seen already 3 rounds in. Yamaha have made some advancements, Honda have as well. Do you feel like you're always going to play catch-up, or you'll get ahead of them?
I think initially we'll always be playing catch-up, of course, until we get ahead of them. But we haven't been doing nothing. We've been working significantly with the electronics. We've tidied that up a lot, passed that on to the riders in the satellite teams. They've all verified that it is better. So we haven't been sitting on our hands. We just haven't been able to try the bigger components at the races yet until the next race in Le Mans. But the chassis was better in the test, as was the engine. So if we can take that a little bit further, we'll be getting closer. We'll have that other piece in the puzzle that we need to make sure that we do keep going forward.
Do you wonder how the bloody hell Casey ever won races on it?
Look, you know, Casey, without a doubt, you know, he's a fantastic rider, and he did a wonderful job on that bike. But there were too many DNFs, and sometimes and I think in this particular instance, Ducati let themselves down a little bit in the sense that they only analysed the success. They never analysed the failures. They treated the DNFs or the crashes, to be more specific of Casey, as bad luck, rather than there might be something not quite right and that Casey had to ride perhaps too close to the limit to win those races. So, you know, the margin perhaps that Casey had on that bike is a lot slimmer than we would like to have on a bike that Valentino rides.
We've already seen the new GP12 in testing. Honda's tested their new bike, or parts of it, for next season. How much of this development phase that you're in right now holds up the bike for next year?
Some and a lot. At some point in the season we have some options to do certain things which have to be planned very carefully, so as to where we are when we make those decisions and where we plan to be after we make those decisions, or where we plan to be if we don't make those decisions. So there are certain things that we can do to continue through this year and improve, and there are certain things we can do to probably accelerate our bike for next year.
How much can you tell us about going back to thousands? How different will it be than what we've seen before? With the electronic advancement we've seen, fuel economy, is it going to be much different?
I don't think you'll see much difference in who's winning the races in terms of riders. I think, hopefully to a degree, there's a bit more of Valentino at the front. But no, genuinely, I think it'll be the same. Top 3 or 4, 5 riders each week. You know, I find it a little bit disappointing going back to the 1,000. I think companies like Suzuki, for example, would like to see some sort of stability in the regulations so that we can all work through to a more equal competition. I know from my talking with Yamaha last year that they would like to build a V4 engine, but while the regulations are continually changing, they don't have the manpower to allow that to happen. So they will not go into the championship next year with another inline 4 engine. So, you know, it stops the sort of improvement development when you're jumping from one set of regulations to another.
At the test that you were at recently, Suter was there with what is for next season they call it the claiming rule bikes, and it's going to be more of, I guess, a production-based. I see it more of a production-based. Maybe I'm completely wrong. Do you think those bikes are going to be anywhere near competitive?
Nowhere, not at all. I think it's sort of a harebrained scheme to try and put more bikes on the grid. Initially, when they were talking about going back to thousands, if the factories weren't prepared to go back and stayed with the 800s, perhaps by offering private teams 1,000 and a claiming rule that it would build the grid up to sort of the 24 bikes that they want. But I can't see anybody really wanting to spend that sort of money to finish somewhere behind 16th.
Do you feel like this is your toughest journey so far in motorcycle racing?
Oh, we'll have to look back before we can say that, Gaz. Though I think the early days with Mick were probably as tough as it gets. Honda hadn't won the championship for a number of years, and you know, there was an expectation there in the early 90s that we should, and you were part of it. So those years was a lot of pressure from Japan. I think I can handle that sort of pressure better now than I could then, but yeah, I still remember those years as probably being the toughest, but ask me in December.
I guess one thing that people at home don't know is that you literally fly across the world and come home for 4 days to see your family, and you go back. You've not been doing it for 2 years, you've been doing it for a hell of a long time, and that commitment's pretty special.
Oh yes, I like what I do. The 4 strokes makes it a little bit easier to get back now, but the aeroplanes are a lot better and a lot faster than they were 30 years ago, and the 600 hours a year that I spend in an aeroplane, I sleep most of it.
We wish you all the best.
Thanks, Evan.
Lots of time to think about motorcycles, 600 hours on a plane, and we'll have more of that insightful chat with Jeremy in our MotoGP coverage on Sunday night. From what you've observed, how long do you reckon before Rossi will win a Grand Prix for Ducati?
From Jeremy Burgess talking, yeah. I would say it's not going to be until late in the season. You know, they're up against it. This test, as he said there, was a massive improvement for Ducati. They made inroads. This weekend at Le Mans will be a big indication of that. And Valentino's injury was a lot worse than I ever thought it was.
JB's obviously spent some time with the bike now. We know it's a tough bike last year, especially to ride. Do you reckon he's got a bit of a newfound respect for Casey and what he did on it last year?
Yeah, and I think from there you can see that he mentions that Casey was fast on it, but for Valentino the limit's just too close, and that creates injuries and crashes and big problems. So it's I think we're for an interesting remaining part of the season for Ducati and all the teams as development goes on. But anyway, enough of MotoGP. We'll take a break, and on the way, a look at what's coming up.